Hello, my name is Osha, and I'm continuing with my discussion in honor of Black History Month. Um, Today is February the 20th, and it's been back to back losses of public figures in this February. Of course, Eric Dane, who was a main figure in Grey's Anatomy, which I used to watch. He was McSteamy. We recently learned he lost his battle with Lou Gehrig's disease, also called ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. May his soul rest in peace. It's particularly sad that he was just um, barely older than me, and I saw a the last interview he did for his daughter, and he could barely speak. He looked very aged from the illness, and he could barely speak. But his advice, what he was saying was, live in the present, right? Live now, live in the present, and that was very important. And it was a huge transformation from when I remembered him 20 years ago. I was a fan of Grey's Anatomy, right? And Grey's Anatomy, of course, was written by a black woman, Shonda Rhimes. I loved the program. At the time, I didn't even know it was a black woman who wrote it, but I just loved it. I was married at the time. My ex-wife loved it as well, so we sat and watched it. So, of course, other than being a fan of is it the black guy, the doctor, is it Isaiah Washington? McSteamy was the other main guy, right? Of course, I stopped watching it once, Shonda Rhimes fired um, Mr. Washington, which I didn't really, I didn't like. Again, that's another element. That's another, in the trope of racism, right? So blacks often being forced to, um, to injure other black people, right? Subvert, sabotage, destroy other blacks, um, while kissing the ring, right, in kowtowing to um, white power structure, and that's part of America. That's part of racism. You'd have to study American society properly in order to be able to understand what happened then. But my goal is not to talk about that element of racism in Shonda Rhimes, internalized racism, and Shonda Rhimes just bowing down to the white racist power structure. Um, um, you don't see white men getting fired in Hollywood for using the N word, right? Which is used indiscriminately in Hollywood, and that's not sanctioning or supporting um, any form of wrongdoing. But the thing is, some punishment is just too extreme, especially when it comes to do with livelihood. A civilized nation, should support every individual's right, every individual's right to earn a livelihood, and you shouldn't use the ability for one to earn a livelihood as a weapon against them because it impugns on their dignity. Part of our constitutional rights, right? Our Bill of Rights were to protect our dignity, to protect our dignity, our human rights. You can't exercise your human rights effectively if you're blackmailed with respect to your ability to earn a living, right? And this is what often happens with black people, black men. Now, importantly, a reason why I was relating Eric Dane's comments with Black History Month, he talked about living in the now, in the present. And as I watched that, I couldn't help but think of lots of black men who are incarcerated and can't live in the present, right? I was wrongfully arrested, right? And I got to see what, first of all, the condition, right, of being in jail, right? It's detention, right? Not prison, as they say, but still um, the disproportionate numbers of black men in a predominantly white county, right? But 80% of the people incarcerated, jailed, or detained are blacks. Black youth, people in the between 18, majority of the black guys there, 90%, 99, 95% are between the ages of 18 and 30. They're young people, very young people. So they're youth. I can't imagine me. I thank God I never spent a day of my life before 45 in jail. So I can't imagine young people, their lives, they've been institutionalized. You see, there's a culture, right? They're culturated, but it becomes part of them. They get used to their lives being taken away. They can't live in the present. They have to live in the future, one day of getting free. And many of these people, once they go into detention, they're on their path to prison because one, they're normally indigent. And then I've from my experience, I've come to learn the office of the public defender, because the Sixth Amendment protects your rights. It says that, well, if you have a right to counsel, you have a right to an attorney paid for by the state. If you're indigent, if you're charged with any form of crime, any crime, right, in which you have a risk of losing your life, liberty, right? So you have a right to an attorney. It turns out, and I learned from Montgomery County, that the Office of the Public Defender, which is paid for by the state, which is under the Attorney General's office, they're supposed to be representing you. You're their client. But it turns out it's just an appendage of the state attorney's office, right? Of course, the state attorney, they're not going to, the state is not the state that's charging you with a crime. They're not going to pay attorneys that are better to undermine, to destroy their case, right? And then they'll lose their cases. They're not going to pay those attorneys that are better than them. And if they are, they're going to make sure they're co-opted. So that's what I learned. The public office of the public defender is co-opted by the state attorney's office, right? In Montgomery County, right? So they're on their way to prison, and they're going to be losing a significant portion of their lives. They can't live in the present. Apart from the fact that there are many in jail who are wrongfully accused, wrongfully charged, like me, uh, for people who say, well, ignore race, they don't, they ignore race to the detriment of people who look like them, black people. They've clearly been ignoring what's been happening in the carceral system in America. America has the worst carceral system in the world, the most incarcerated people in the world. And it is a contradiction, it's a paradox, considering the fact that it's an oxymoron, considering the fact that America is supposed to be land of the free, yet it has the most incarcerated people in the world. And is that to say that American citizens are bad people? Then what's the purpose of praising America if America keeps locking up its people like animals, caging them, because it's bad people that should be in prison? And so people like Morgan Freeman are not looking at what's going on in American prisons, in American jails, how black people are being wholesale carted off, right? And their lives, they're losing their time, their lives, unless he assumes the false narrative that black people are just inherently criminal or just they have a tendency to commit crimes, and so they should be put away from the rest of society. What about me? I haven't committed any crime. I didn't commit any crime. In fact, there was a crime committed against me, right? I was removed from my home, not committing any crime, based on a false accusation, right? You're supposed to be innocent. You're innocent until proven guilty. That's a principle that underscores our our legal system. You're innocent until proven guilty, and then the state's supposed to provide evidence at trial to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a crime. The police came and raided me. I've done videos about what happened, so I'm not going to discuss now. But the thing is, I'm an innocent man. I had an impeccable record. I still do, despite the false arrest, the false charges. That's just defamation. I get to sue the state of Maryland later on, right? Once this is over. I'm waiting. I've been waiting. It's 3 years, now going on 4 years. I don't have my trial is and they're misdemeanors. These are all misdemeanors. It turns out the police officers who came to my home, 40, without an arrest warrant, shot me in the head. You see these lines here? That's where those are the permanent scarring. Shot me in the head. Right? Claimed I'm backing them, raising my hand in surrender. I'm confused about what's going on. They come on a false accusation and they shoot me and tase me. They claimed that I assaulted them. Meanwhile, the body cam shows something different. They're over 20 feet away from me. I'm backing them. I don't assault anybody. So you see, the way the even law enforcement, right, is weaponized against black people. Black people, when I used to hear it on TV that when cops kill black men, it was because they feared that the black man was a threat. And I'd wonder, okay, what's up? And the cop would walk. They were using this for me. And the judge who's been trying to coerce me to take a plea bargain so the cops can walk away free, scot-free, he's been like, look, I'm lucky to be alive. And the cop was saying it in a hearing that before an administrative judge, saying that, look, he intended to kill me. But here I am, I'm alive, that he intended to use his Glock to shoot me, to kill me. It's bizarre, so I'm alive. And so when I hear people say, well, black people are just likely to commit crimes, I know that's not true because I haven't committed a crime. The police came to raid me in my home where I was supposed to feel safest. I lived alone. I wasn't fighting anybody. I was alone, not committing any crime. I don't own any weapons. And I was raided, and then police falsified their records. And I haven't had a trial. And there's a state attorney's office that protects the police, right? These are injustices that white men don't experience. White people don't experience it, right? If I'm living in a predominantly white county and there's 80% of the jail population, detention facilities is populated by black men, right? I know if we go to a black county, we're not going to see more white men there. We're not going to see more white men. So people like Morgan Freeman, does he think that blacks are just likely to commit more crime? That's why they're populating the jails at astronomically higher rates than white people and the white majority and other races. No, it's because of the structural racism. It's because of race, right? And I experienced it. In my home, I'm protected by the Fourth Amendment. I've done videos talking about, the protections we have. In the place I was supposed to feel safest, 40 cops came to raid me like I was a terrorist, like I was Al-Qaeda, framed me. They even stole my property. They released toxins, tear gas into my apartment. And the judge prevented me from going back to my apartment. It's been 3 years. My apartment that was in my name, I had a lease. I was being charged by the landlord, but the judge prevented me from going back there. An investigator who went on my behalf, video recorded, and showed, the scene, how the police had destroyed my apartment and stolen my property, stolen my cash, stolen my credit cards, my debit cards, my wristwatches, my cameras, stolen my property, destroyed my property, right? What they didn't destroy, they stole, right? Fell sick for 2 days because of the toxins there. That's the other. That was actually what I wanted to talk about. The effect of racism, right? The environmental impact that it has on Black people. The illness that Eric Dane died of, may his soul rest in peace. Um, Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. Um, only it's only its cause is just traceable uh, to hereditary or genetic factors by just about roughly 5 to 10% of cases. Only 5 to 10% of cases is linked to hereditary. About 90% of what causes Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, which killed Eric Dane, is attributable to environmental factors, toxins in the environment, sporadic factors, toxins in the environment. Because of racism, blacks live in, they're pushed into terrible environments in America. Now, what happened to me, the sort of tear gas that was released in my environment, it made me think about what Black people have been going through in these terrible environments they've been living in. By the way, those gases, Lou Gehrig's, it turns out that lots of veterans, veterans are normally prone to this disease, this ALS disease, right? And there was a time that was in the news a few years ago, and this is just with the advancement of investigative tools, more transparency, and more. There's still cover-ups in America, but now we have more investigative tools because of the advancement in information technology and telecommunications. Right? There was a time, uh, you know, that America was outraged by, well, not enough, outraged by the uh, the lead poisoning that happened in Black communities was it in Michigan or Detroit somewhere? You know, lead poisoning. These are things that, they cause neurodegenerative illnesses. These are things that blacks are, it's racism that subjects blacks to certain environments when they, segregation, the sort that prevents blacks from being able to live next side by side with white people. They're pushed to certain communities, right? Underfunded, communities in which the government doesn't, you know, take care of, communities that are left in disrepair, and the environmental, you know, toxins flying around, and black kids are exposed to these things. Since I've, prior to my wrongful arrest and these false charges against me, I was somebody that I was constantly at the gym. I've Since childhood, I've always been known to take care of myself physically, mentally. That's just what I've, my childhood friends know me for that. Even, I guess, people who hardly know me, adults, because I always posted my food, my workouts, me in the gym. I posted these things on Facebook, not to show off, but I like a record. That was one of the things that I loved about Facebook, the fact that I can keep a record of my life. I'm a historian. I have a record to refer to, right? So I watched what I eat. I was a vegetarian, right? I hardly ate meat. If I wanted to treat myself, I'd eat chicken once in a while, fish, but I was mainly a vegetarian. I watched what I eat, right? I ate lots of vegetables, lots of fruits. Since my diet has been forced to I've been forced to change my diet because, locked up in prison wrongfully, sorry, in jail, not prison. Well, it's the same thing. My liberty is taken from me. Locked up, I had to eat what they were providing in jail. And crappy food. I remember the first 3 weeks there, I was like, no, I'm not going to eat this food. So my first 3 weeks, I didn't eat. I was just taking liquids. I refused to eat, right? I didn't eat. Eventually, what you do? You just die. They just, hey. So I had to take canned food, and I'd never eaten canned food. I never used to eat canned food. So I realized it's canned food they're giving us. At the hospital, the same thing, right? So the judge took 15 months of my life that I was eating crap. And I've been in America for 27 years, and I watched what I ate. Yeah, I just didn't eat the crap, and I was forced to eat crap. Now I haven't been able to go to the gym the way I normally do, my workouts. I've been eating, I've changed my diet, but I've been like, this is temporary. But it had an impact. It's one of the things that impacted me, my thinking, because I had to think about it, that my God, they're black kids, they're people who are indigent, they're forced to eat this crappy stuff throughout their lives. Because we know amongst the things that are carcinogenic is processed foods, canned foods. And I was exposed to this. I was like, there are people who eat this stuff throughout their lives, and it affects them. It causes diseases, So black people lose their lives, lose years, fall ill. We haven't talked about the trauma they're subjected to because of racism, right? I talked about earlier about the blowback from Brown versus Board of Education, and how white officials, the white government officials in the South, resisted um, integration, and instead they shut down public schools. So black students lost education. Meanwhile, their parents, black people, were paying taxes that were being used by white officials to create segregation academies, private institutions for white kids to use vouchers and taxpayer funds, grants to go to send their kids. Meanwhile, black kids lost years. Apart from that, when those black public schools were shut down, many black parents, right, black teachers, black principals, they lost their jobs. Thousands of them became unemployed. These are real consequences of racism. But people like Morgan Freeman, because of his proximity to whiteness, right, he doesn't get to feel what his black people related to him, what they experience because of his whiteness. He says, oh, he makes such a glib statement that ignores, and so racism, it has consequences in America. And again, it's inextricably woven into the tapestry of America. And ignoring it is not the way to unravel racism, and so that everybody can achieve the promise of the equality and dignity that the American Constitution and the American experiment promises all Americans. I'm going to stop this video here, and I'll continue later. My name is Osha, and I'll keep you posted.